moving on to the next decade, 60 to 70. And I strongly believe that women in this age to be screened a lot more
Yes.
for this condition called osteoporosis.
Yes.
I spoke to an orthosurgeon before. He told me that the increased risk of joint replacements, knee replacements, hip replacements are happening more in females
Yes.
compared to males. And the key thing is because their bone health
Yes.
is not the same.
Yes.
Multiple reasons because of hormonal imbalance and everything. But the main thing is that lack of strength training, no muscles around the knees,
Yes.
number one. And then obviously the obesity kicks in towards the end of the menopausal period and if you're doing the reproductive period as well. So I want you to teach our audience, okay, how do we diagnose osteoporosis with this? We usually use DEXA scan.
Yes.
And how do you use that in your population? And then when should we screen and at what age?
Sounds good. So again, in the 60s, we're talking about the 60s, the bone health becomes a very important part of the consideration. And here a DEXA scan, essentially think about it as a way to see, right? Almost like an X-ray of your full body. And of the bones and what's happening between the bones and the muscles and what's going on. That then allows us to determine conditions like arthritis, osteoporosis, as well as any areas of lower muscular, right, concerns, which will lead to falls, right? And falls are our biggest problem. Right, and
fall means they slip and they fall
and
down and they
right?
fracture.
And they fracture, and then suddenly movement is restricted and life changes.
Exactly.
Right? So all of this, remember, we're doing to keep in mind the fall risk. Right. So bone health is a concern, and you don't want to fall, right? Because if you fall, then a whole bunch of your life and your life's
span also decreases eventually.
Sorry, what I'm going to call health span. Right? Your quality of life suddenly decreases.
Correct.
So the DEXA scan is important to do to be able to determine, right, what your bone health is like. For women, for sure, for the reasons you raised, we don't do as much flexibility and strength training early in life. So when we think about physical activity, right, we think that just simply doing much more household chores, right, is sufficient. But actually, flexibility and strength is correlated with the quality of life much, much more. And you should start that in your 30s and your 40s. The other area is the hormones. Our hormones change completely after menopause, right? This is a way of life. And that is why women bone health is a much bigger consideration than men. Not to say that men, you should not worry about your bone health. You should too. But for women, the changes in the hormones, right, result in many changes, right? And therefore causing suddenly a difference in what's going on inside your body. And therefore bone health becomes a concern. So we should take care and make sure that any hormonal issues that come up, we watch for. If you have early menopause, that means menopause in your late 30s, right, early to late 30s, then you must actually start your DEXA not in your 60s, but actually in your 50s, right? Because remember, because of those hormonal changes and issues earlier in life, it's impacting your bone health. And the way to screen for bone health is DEXA, right? And therefore, you have to actually make sure if you have no issues, no symptoms, no family history, 60 is an okay place to start. But if you do, then you should start earlier.
So when I talked to an OB/GYN doctor, so she was saying that early menopause is happening more frequently. So what happens in that period is that your hormones changes, where you don't have the bone preserving hormone that much.
That's right.
So when you have early menopause, we recommend, calcium and vitamin D supplements and a lot more as well. So there is something called this FRAX score that you briefly touched upon.
So in ProHealth, one of the things that we've done is we've taken into account this age group, right? And we said, listen, what is important for people who are above 60? Bone health becomes very important. And FRAX score, which is the fracture risk score, right? We are now using this to determine your risk of fracture. As a result of which, again, we come back to if you fall, your frac score is high, so your fracture risk is high. Then we want you to be more careful and we can advise you accordingly, right?
So when the frac score is high, the risk of fracture is high.
That's right. So you want to take supplements, calcium, right? Important multivitamins and so forth, so that you're able to preserve the bone density. We also recommend that for women, even if you're starting at that age group, simple things like, add a kilo weight and lift it, right? As a way to strengthen muscles, or around your foot, right? Tie a water bottle that's full of water, right? This anybody can do. And then lift your feet at the knee joints, right? Then this will strengthen those muscles. Start to do this as part of your routine. You have time in your 60s, hopefully, to be able to do these kinds of things in addition to the regular screening.